I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us from Switzerland, a bit of a regular guest. We really like him here. I'm so sorry I haven't had him on in a while. He is the head of Matterhorn Asset Management. He is Egon von Greyerz. Egon von Greyerz, thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Greg, good to talk to you today, especially since we're having some exciting times ahead of us, I think.
We do. I mean, you also have you vault gold for people in a couple of continents for very wealthy people in secret locations. You have, I don't know, 20 years in the European banking system, deep banking relationships. What do you think about this bid we caught in gold the last few days? That gold's going up here in the face of a lot of debt and a lot of turmoil. What's going on? What's the real reason it's going up?
Well, Greg, in the very short term, as we know, gold reacts to events. But the real moves in gold are never due to events. Now, the North Korea situation is being blamed by the press, but they don't understand what's happening. I mean, this North Korea is just a catalyst for a world which is so indebted that it will never get out of the current situation. And all gold does over time is to reflect that. And that's also why we've been into gold now. It's physical heavily for 17 years and why we'll continue. We are not worried the slightest about these short-term moves, but I actually think the cycle was not right to turn off. I think we're going to have a very strong move in gold in the next few months. And therefore, you need a catalyst, and it happened to be North Korea. But gold will continue to levels which, in my view, will be considerably higher than the rise we've seen in the cryptocurrencies.
You wrote a piece about debt slavery, and you quoted $2 quadrillion in global debt and debt slavery, and it's a new form of invisible slavery. I mean, the gold should have gone way up, way higher because the debt is gone to astronomical, unbelievable, all-time levels, right along with the stock market. Are you telling me that the price of gold they're gonna finally uncork the price of gold and allow it to go up? Are elites going to allow it to go up because we know it's suppressed?
Well, just look at the debt level that you mentioned. So just think about global GDP being $70 trillion. And then, the way I get to 2 quadrillion, which is mind-boggling and is, 30 times global GDP, it's very simple. You're talking about debt, direct debt of about 230 trillion. You're talking about unfunded liabilities worldwide of another 250 trillion roughly. So you're up to 500 trillion. And then you're talking about derivatives, 1.4 quadrillion or 1.5 quadrillion. So that takes you up to 2 quadrillion of debt and liabilities. I mean, I know that people will say, well, the derivatives are only a gross figure and be netted down, but we're not 10 years after the previous crisis, and we're 10 years after when it started with BNP Paribas and hedge funds, and then later on Lehman Brothers collapse, of course. And we know that gross liabilities become net liabilities when counterparty doesn't pay, and therefore the 1.5 quadrillion in derivatives will remain a gross liability because there's no other side they're going to stand and pay up. I forgot what you said about the question. You had another question on this.
Well, are the elites finally going to let it go up, or is it just going to go up because there are elites that's going? There's no other asset. There's, unless we're buying plutonium on the moon or buying something off this world. I mean, there really is no other asset to protect yourself when you have that kind of debt. The 2 quadrillion number. And thank you for explaining how you got there with all the derivatives and all the liabilities and all the debt. It's stunning. And you're going to go for a bond? I mean, even Alan Greenspan is warning about that there's a bond bubble. Interest rates could rise rapidly, and you know what happens to the bond market, being you have all this experience. When rates go up, it blows up. So, I mean, is that what is pushing the price higher? It's just really elites getting into it and finally saying, okay, I think this is low enough.
Yeah, well, a few things here. First of all, I think the elite will lose control. They're not going to be able to stop it anymore. As I said just a minute ago, what's happening to the cryptocurrencies is the only reason why they're going up so fast is that there is no control and there is no manipulation, and they can freely go up. And it's obviously an uncontrolled market. But remember, cryptocurrencies is an electronic form of paper currencies. There's no intrinsic value behind. But coming back to gold, I believe that exactly what we're seeing in the cryptocurrencies, once they lose control of gold, I think it would go up extremely fast, and we could see hundreds of dollars and also thousands of dollars, because gold has to reflect the debt level that we just discussed, and also the amount of money that will need to be printed to solve the next crisis. And I think 10 years we're exactly 10 years since the BNP Paribas started the crisis with freezing a couple of hedge funds that were in the subprime market. And I think it doesn't have to happen exactly after 10 years, but I think we are due for it now. And I could see this autumn being extremely volatile and extremely crucial for financial markets. And I think that central banks will panic and they will print a lot of money. And I think against their will, interest rates will go up because they will lose control of interest rates. The bond markets, we're now talking about 100 trillion bond market. And remember that 25 years ago, that was not more than 10 trillion. So the debt is growing exponentially, and interest rates will go up because the long end of the bond markets will be sold. People will get out of the long end, and central banks will not be able to buy all of those bonds. And if they do, they will just exacerbate the problem. Currencies will collapse, and interest rate will continue to go up. So it becomes a vicious circle. I think that we could very well see this all starting to happen now. We certainly have everything in place, just from the financial point of view, and then we can come on to the world economy and the geopolitical situation. But this is why whether gold starts going up strongly this autumn, I think it will do, and I think we could even see new highs at the end of this year. But that's totally irrelevant. We are not looking at the price, as you know. We are looking at gold as insurance. We're looking at gold as a way of protecting against the fake money intervention and the debt slavery that we have in the world. And this is today, there's nothing else that protects you as well as physical gold. The cryptocurrencies, to me, that's tulipomania. I think they could go up a lot further. I've said that. I think they can continue to go up because at least people think that this is money, but it is just nothing different to me to paper money. But it's at least electronic money, as I said, which is not within the system and is not at this point, and that might change, at this point controlled by governments. And this is why people are piling into cryptocurrencies. Most people don't understand gold still. As we know, it's about 0.5% of world financial assets, or slightly less, is in gold today. So therefore, it's not on the horizon of most people. But this is a fad now. Cryptocurrencies. I mean, the technology is fantastic. The technology of cryptocurrencies or the crypto technology will last in a lot of other areas. But I think at some point in the next year or two, whatever, cryptocurrencies will have a sad, I won't say collapse, but it's certainly come down to totally different levels. But before that, we could go a lot higher, definitely. Bubbles last much longer than we ever think.
Are the bankers going to go crazy when their bonds are rendered worth a lot less or worth less Are the bankers going to go crazy trying to take everything they can from people, their houses, their cars, their businesses? I mean, to take real assets from people. Are the bankers going to go crazy when this thing finally blows?
Well, they have no other option. We have seen now the trend of banning cash in many countries, or reducing the level of cash that people can take out of the bank, which in many European countries is not more than 1,000 to 3,000 euros. We've seen many countries like Sweden going virtually cashless. I mean, there's a lot of shops, a lot of places don't even accept cash in Sweden. And that's a process that will continue. So it's going to become a lot easier for banks to temporarily stop bank runs. But that doesn't mean that people won't still queue up at the doors, and they still want, they will still go and attack governments or whoever is stopping them from getting their money. But the banks will, as I've been saying this for a while, they will grab whatever assets the clients have. They will freeze them. The EU is now contemplating a new law that you can freeze the assets for 5 to 20 days in terms of crisis. I think that could easily be extended to much longer. So they are, in one way, more prepared for a crisis this time. But that's not going to stop the crisis. It will still be there. It's just that people, for a while, might not get their money out. But that's going to be even worse, because if people don't get their money out, they will panic and there will be civil unrest. And there'll be a lot of aggressive people, which will not be pleasant for the people who are in power or the bankers. So yes, all assets of banks, and that'll be the same with pension funds. I mean, pension funds will be used to invest in euro bonds or in US treasuries, and of course they will be invested for long periods, because there's never going to be paid back. There'll be moratoria on bonds, which means that they'll be extended. The duration of them will be extended. Yes, the banks and the bankers and the central banks will do all they can, but at the end of the day, that's not going to solve the crisis. So they will also, of course, print money, and the money printing will, in my view, escalate massively in the coming years. That will lead to, I'm convinced, hyperinflation. I don't think they will succeed this time with any of the measures. They will try, they will be desperate. If you asked me 10 years ago, would they save the system for 10 years, which they did? Well, they didn't save it because they made the problem a lot bigger. Global debt has gone from 120 trillion in 2006 to 225 trillion today. Central banks have printed another $18 trillion. So the situation now is a lot worse than it was then. And so the bubble is much bigger. And this time, remember that interest rates worldwide were around 5–6% 10 years ago. Today they are 0 or negative in many countries. So they have nothing they cannot achieve anything by adjusting interest rate. Well, they can make them more negative, but when you have people are not going to give them any money to invest with negative interest rates, and there won't be any money around anyway.
What do you think about the Italian banks? I've got one source that has been, which I don't really put on the air much, but I'm going to just say one source, but it's saying that the Italian banks are in big trouble. They are in much bigger trouble than anybody wants to report. And just the overt evidence that the Italian banks are in trouble. They have political turmoil, mainly because of their banking and all that. What do you think of the Italian banks could be the trigger that could pull the whole party, down to the basement?
Well, Greg, sadly, the whole European banking system, and especially the one that ECB is running, is totally bust. The Italian banks, yeah, you're absolutely right. They are hiding the problems. The non-performing loans and the bad debts are a lot bigger than they will ever reveal or tell us. And of course, the ECB is in there all the time, buying bonds from Italy, buying from Spanish bonds, etc., to protect them. So the ECB risk is increasing exponentially. I don't know, not to talk about Greece. Of course, Greece is still bankrupt, will remain bankrupt. And then you can go around all the other countries, Ireland, France, etc. So the problem is just a lot bigger today than it ever was. They've done a great job in fooling all of the people most of the time by keeping everything up. VIX down at under 10, the volatility index, stock markets up at highs when the risk is greater than ever. So from that point of view, it shows that if you tell people lies often enough, they will believe it. And that's what's happened. But this is why when this ends, it's going to end in tears. It's not going to end with this just slow, gradual process of deterioration. It's going to end with a bang. And it's going to be very, very unpleasant for most of us, in my view. I'm not a pessimist, it might sound like it. I'm not negative, but I'm just looking at the risk. And the risk is so clear to me that this is a risk that no one can actually do anything about, because there is nothing you can do to debts that cannot be repaid. You just take your own country. The US hasn't had a budget surplus since the early 1960s. Not once, not even the Clinton years was a budget surplus, although people think it was. That tells you this is the strongest economy in the world, cannot make ends meet for soon 60 years. That's just unbelievable. But that's the state of the world, and we're living on a lie, and you can't live on a lie forever. People say, so why can't we go on for another 10 years? Because you cannot, in the end, the laws of nature will actually prevail. You cannot just continue to expand bubbles forever. You can do it for a limited time, but in the end, they will burst, like every bubble so far in history has. And that's what we're going to experience in the next few years, in my view.
What are your elite friends? I mean, you vault, bars, tons. You vault tons of gold for people on a couple of different continents in secret, I'm sure, armed guarded locations. Have you heard anything from your elite clients that say, oh, listen, here's why I think this fall is going to be bad, or here's why I think next year is going to be bad? Have you heard any scuttlebutt from your elite clients who are obviously pretty connected if they're vaulting tons of gold?
Yeah. Can I just, Greg, if you don't mind, can we just not use the elite as the word for our clients?
Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, wealthy.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Actually, I don't mean to have any bad connotation. Wealthy people who can do math. How about that? Are the wealthy people that can do math telling you anything? How about that?
I understood that. Clear. I just want to make that clear that our clients are not the deep state elite.
Yeah, no. Let's call them
our clients are people who are worried about the world and who actually want to protect themselves. So yes, you are. It's interesting now that we're seeing big money is now starting to actually come in into the gold area, either increase or come in for the first time in a way that is quite new in the last, I would say, last few weeks. So people are sensing it. People who understand what's happening. Of course, we have lots of clients that we've had for the last 15 years and increasing. But also there is now new money coming in, which it hasn't on the scale that we are seeing now. People come in with, and therefore, I think this is always the case that there are people who smell things before they happen. So I think it's a bit like Cliff High, smelling it on the internet with his predictive linguistics. And it's the same here. I think there are some people, they probably don't know why. They're just getting more worried. So we are seeing that, which is very interesting. Very, very interesting. And I think that is, people are sensing that something is going to happen.
Well, this fall, we have Steve Mnuchin, who, and people aren't catching this, but I am. Every time I see him say this, he's got this look of panic on his face. Like, hey, you need to raise the debt ceiling now. Did I tell you need to raise the debt ceiling now? And then we have this spat between Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell, who could have left, could have left the Senate closed so he could make some recess appointments, but he didn't. He left it in what's it called, pro forma, I believe, session, which is in session but not in session. Nobody's there, but they're in session, so the president can't make recess appointments. And then Mitch McConnell talking about the leader of the Senate. It's just for all you people in Europe. He's the head of the Senate. He for the Republicans, he is saying that Donald Trump's expectations were too great. And then this boy, he's getting into a Twitter war with Donald Trump, and he says, "You're right. I can't believe he can't get it done." All that to say, what about this fall with, everybody thinks that, they'll raise the debt ceiling, everything will be done. I'm not so sure they're going to get taxes done. They're going to get anything done on Obamacare. They're going to get a debt ceiling raised. I have this, the Democrats don't want a wall built. They're willing to shut government down to stop that because they like all the, the voters coming in that'll vote for their stuff because they're desperate. What about this fall? Isn't there a lot of wild cards this fall that could, this thing could tip everything over, or am I just being Chicken Little?
You're right. I mean, when we come back and talk about catalysts can be anywhere in the periphery. You never know. I mean, the debt ceiling is, to me, that's just a joke. The whole thing, the debt ceiling has been increased, 50 times in the last 20 years or more. And this is a chronic increase in the chronic disease, the U.S. debt. So it will just continue to be increased. But that might be a catalyst, but I don't think that wouldn't be a surprise because the U.S., we know U.S. is, whether they increase the debt limit or not, they're spending more money than they have. The debt will certainly go up by more than $1 trillion in the current year and in coming years, and that's before anything. So yes, that could be one catalyst, but I think we have to come back to the banking system, the European banking system. I mean, the U.S. banks are slightly better now from the point of view balance sheet than they were in 2006-07. But the derivatives, there we're looking at, you're looking at the J.P. Morgans and the Goldman Sachs of this world. Their derivative positions are very, very dangerous. So on that side, they're just as bad as the European bank. And I think the combination of debt that won't be repaid, and we haven't even talked about consumer debt. I mean, it's not just the U.S. with the auto loans, student loans, and again, I'm sure housing market loans will be a problem again. But you have that in every country now. You have it in the UK. You have it in a lot of European countries. You have it in Nordic countries, you have it in Australia, you have it in Canada. So it's everywhere. So you don't have to, US is one and it's the biggest economy, but they will continue to lie and cheat and tell you things that are not the truth, although they try to make it into the truth and by their fake news. But the other dilemma with the US, of course, is that you have now a lame president. Where both political parties are voting against him, and you set up things. This.
I mean, it looks like I'm glad you brought that up because he wants to drain the swamp. He wants to do things for Americans, and both the Democrats. You expect that from the Democrats. You don't expect that from the Republicans too. But it looks like both parties like that swamp. They like stealing money out of America. They like it just the way it is, and they look like they're stopping him. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, definitely they're stopping him because, and I totally agree with Paul Craig Robertson, the excellent interview that you did with him, that, the U.S. politicians, Congress and the Senate are controlled by defense industry, pharmaceutical industry, the energy industry, and therefore, and they have a vested interest in running the things, and they're not going to let Trump win over them. So therefore, sadly, there is now a lame duck situation, and instead you have, they're trying to impeach the president by setting up a grand jury for a crime that they haven't found what it is yet, talking to people overseas before the election. You know, it just sounds ridiculous to me that. You know, are you not allowed to talk to people? Why do you want to act? Well, they do that because they want to impeach the president. Which, you know, to me, this is back to McCarthyism. That was exactly the same in the 50s. I mean, I'm old enough to remember it, although I was relatively young when it happened. When people were accused and falsely accused, and evidence was actually made up against people, and in the end they found out. But this is, you know, this is the scare that is, I think, in my view, not justified. Why not? And this might sound politically controversial, but why not set up a grand jury instead to investigate why Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, etc., were bombed, which actually has had, you know, for no reason, since they have nothing to do with them, done nothing against the world or the United States. And then it's created, and this is the consequences, was created for these countries and in Europe, a situation with migrants, with misery. You know, that would be a bigger reason to set up a grand jury for that. I know it's never going to happen, but what I'm saying is, I am surprised, but I'm not really surprised. I'm disappointed that now the biggest economy in the world is totally paralyzed because of political infighting. How will it end? And I think, you know, the way we are seeing it here from Europe is that they're doing everything they can to stop the president being effective. The thing is, of course, he's got the support of 40 to 50% of the people.
Yeah. That's a big problem for him. But that could be a catalyst to you know, if we get paralyzed enough, people may say, you know, we're selling the dollar, we're selling your markets, or, you know, we could have a run on the dollar if they think the whole country is paralyzed. Am I wrong? I mean, that could also be a catalyst, the political paralyzation of America.
That will happen, and I've, you know, since December, I've been saying that there was a definite turn of the dollar since December last year, and the dollar is in a downtrend, and I think the dollar could get into free fall even at some point. I mean, we know that all currencies will continue their race to the bottom, but it will be one at a time. And it now looks like it's the dollar that will start that race in earnest and accelerate down. So the dollar and the currencies, you know, markets can be manipulated by governments, by central banks, but the currencies are very much harder to manipulate if all central banks are not in agreement. And here, of course, they're not, because everybody is now worrying about their own currency, protecting their own currency. So therefore, this is the competitive devaluations will accelerate, and I think the dollar will be next, and that could create a major crisis around the world because of all the dollars that are floating around the world. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
North Korea, China, we start getting to a shooting war. You know, start dropping even tactical nukes. I mean, they're nukes. If we get into a war, the most probable is North Korea. Does that just tank the whole world economy right then and there, or can the world economy take a war in North Korea?
You know, this is such an interesting point. I've been thinking about it. Of course, both men know that if they pull the trigger, you know, Kim and Trump, you know, that's the end of the world. Because they're not going to be left alone. You know, China will come in, Russia will come in, etc. So, you know, they, I'm sure, prefer threatening and words rather than action. The dilemma is both these men actually are as near the button as you can be. Because here, you know, Kim obviously, he is omnipotent. There's no one can stop him, because if they do, he shoots them or kills them. But Trump, I mean, this is the only area where he still has power, if I'm not wrong. the U.S. situation when it comes to pressing the nuclear button, because the Congress and the Senate cannot. He doesn't need to ask them for this. So this is actually one area where he can exercise the real power without their involvement. So what I'm saying is, and I hope that my fears are badly placed, because I really, both these men are unpredictable, and therefore the risk of war is higher than any time in my life, and I've lived a relatively long life. I hope that it won't happen, but the risk is very high.
Egon von Greyerz from Matterhorn Asset Management. Behind you, just so people know, that is a golden Matterhorn. It's a gold mountain behind you, just so people know what that is, so you don't think it's kind of, what is that picture? That's what it is. And of course, you vault gold. And excellent interview, my friend. Excellent perspective on what's going on in the world. I'm just very worried about this fall. I just think there's a lot of stuff going on that I've said this before, and I've been wrong, but this fall looks particularly dangerous to me. Before we close, handicap this fall. Is this fall as dangerous as any other fall, or does it look more dangerous, and why?
Yeah, I agree. It is more dangerous than any time in the last 10 years since the last crisis, in my view. And it looks very precarious. Now, just a couple of points. This is not where we store our gold, on the outside of the Matterhorn. It might look like it, but we have inside of mountains, but not actually the Matterhorn. It's a bit hard to access. Also, it might sound that I've been pretty pessimistic and negative. Yes, I am worried about the world. I am worried about the risks. But I have to stress that people have to. You can't. You or I, and most people cannot solve the world's financial or political problems. But we can look after our little micro worlds, which is our own families, friends, companies, whatever we're involved in, and life will go on. Except for with nuclear, a major nuclear war, life will go on. Just will go on at a different level. And I've always been a great believer in prepare yourself, take all the measures that you need to, and then enjoy life, because that's life is there to enjoy, not to go and worry all the time. Although I might sound like a worrier. But that's just part of me.
All right, Egon von Greyerz, Matterhorn Asset Management. Thank you so much for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Great to talk to you, and we will watch this autumn and hopefully have a chance to talk later in the year.
Okay, we will. I'll have you back. Thanks for being on, Egon.
Thank you.